I was 8 years younger than Joe, so I would have been in first or second grade when he met this awesome group of friends that he had through high school. Obviously, nobody had a cooler big brother than I had, but also nobody had a big brother with better friends than he had. You guys were my heroes. Frenchie still is. John Gildo, you became a kook, so sorry you brought that on yourself. Going back for most of my life, if anybody ever asked me who my best friend was, I always said Joe. But if you asked Joe, he would have said John Gildo. John and Gail and their kids and grandkids were his other family. You meant the world to him. Before Joe became the barge guy that we all know, he used to drive truck and he's based in Ballard. And he happened to be doing some moonlighting at Southeast Barge Lines just up the street when Mike Dropkin noticed him and hired him just in time to load Samson Tug and Barge Voyage number 1 out of Seattle. Aside from him taking an instant liking to this business, the Bagan family made Samson such a fun place to work that he stuck around for 18 years and enjoyed it. When Joe was ready to make a change in his life, we had some long talks. We always had some long talks. I'm happy to say it was me that convinced him to get out of the office and get back on the barges, and Northland was the place to do that. He loved his job at Northland. Even going back years ago when we talked about how long we wanted to work, he always said he would keep doing the DOJ as long as he possibly could. And that's what he did right up to his final day. One of the central hubs of Joe's life was the farm. And I know there will be so many farm stories that I'm going to leave that to others. Online, so many people have written these great condolences, and so many people mention Joe's laugh. And that is true. But if you did it right, it wasn't just a laugh. It was him holding his guts in with one hand, covering his mouth with the other, tears pouring out his eyes, and his body rackling convulsions. Some of you were at St. Joe's that day and saw that. Another time that happened, I don't know how he kept that 56 Chevy from crashing on the freeway, driving me up to the farm. Though our family seems to all share the same DNA, Joe seemed to end up with the stubborn gene somehow. He lived his life on his own terms and only on his own terms. And if anyone has a story where he did something he didn't want to do, I want to hear it. And they had so many different parts of his life, growing up on the hill, going to prep, working in Samson, working at Northland. We'll hear stories, I think, from all parts of his life that we'll all learn from. All you people from the hill and prep and my own family, though, if you're going to tell the wrong kind of story, I'm going to cut this cord. So, out of all of us gathered here, I'm the lucky one on this boat, because I had Joe for my big brother, and I always will. The rest of the family and the rest of you are welcome to come up and tell stories. I think Mark wants to start first.
Here you go, John!
Thanks, John. Those of you that came over to Queen Anne when Joe and I lived there for many years, you knew we liked music. Joe loved the Rolling Stones, as did I. I can't freaking believe Keith Richards outlasted Joe. All due respect to Keith. I love Keith too. But speaking of music, and I can't find from a few friends what exactly happened, but Joe's on the cover of an album, Guess Who, live at the Paramount. And Richard told me that he was at that, but it was a 2-night concert. And Richard couldn't remember which, and neither could you. Anyway, if anyone has the album, Guess Who, live at the Paramount, Joe and a few of his knucklehead friends are on the cover. I wanted to tell, I don't know how to get that to work. I wanted to tell just a few things about Joe, but first of all, I want to say most of us from the Hill, at least I did, I always thought Harbor View was for overdoses and gunshots. Those people are phenomenal. The family was great with Joe. I'm away most of the time, so I didn't see him as much as others, but John, Teresa, what you guys did is unbelievable, and George, but no one did more than Liz, and what she did with Joe and for Joe, I just want to say thanks. I don't think John will cut the cord if I don't mention him in the story. So if you hear the name John, it's a different John. And you know who I mean. And he said, go ahead, uncensored. And so I will give it uncensored, but Richard, Chris McAvoy, Frenchie, John, don't worry. I'm going to pick them somewhat, anyway. But, and one of the stories I was going to tell, Richard stole from me, and you'll hear that a little bit later. And, or he didn't steal it, he was involved with it. But anyway, Joe and I, from the time we were almost born, we had the same bedroom. And all growing up, we moved a couple times, but we were always in the same room until Joe's senior year when he got his own room, that private room up on the 3rd floor. And any of you that were Joe's friends back then, that was a fun room. Really fun room. And toward the end, or in the past year and a half, Joe was a little bit, it was hard for him to see a lot of people a lot of times, so we tried to respect his privacy, and everyone else did too, but he loved seeing people. And last summer, just before his surgery, we had a mini reunion for my grade at prep. And Danny Lehman stayed over with me, and we went up just to say hi for a few minutes. And all of a sudden, it was 3 hours later. And for Joe, that was, at least when I was involved, that was a record. It was a great time, and we talked about all the old neighborhood stuff that you see pictures of in there. And but with the same room, and then Joe and I moved to Queen Anne together. We were on Whidbey together with John, back to Capitol Hill, all that for a long time, the whole life. And we fought a lot, always. And anyone from Capitol Hill isn't even, that gets it. But we also, if anyone was against us, we fought together, and it didn't always work out usually well for them. Joe was tough. He was always, since we were little, he was really, really tough. And I wasn't. So it was great hanging out with him because he could take care of me. The problem was, I wasn't always with him. So I learned to run real fast. But Joe never did back down, ever, from anything or anybody. Anyway, in 5th grade, I believe it was 5th grade, Chris or Richard, I know, is when he decided, I'm no longer Joey, I am Joe. And it was one day, out of nowhere, that was it. He was Joe. But most of us never could call him anything but Joey. And all of his friends pretty much did right away. Not my friends. But these days, seeing people who know him only in his later life, and they see some of the little kids, Joe's great with the little kids, and they all call him Joey, and they're like, who are they talking about? Who's Joey? He doesn't look like a Joey, but to us, he is. And what I wanted to do was just tell a few little stories from Joe and I growing up, and run it by, and hopefully they'll be easier to talk. You know, beautiful weather here all week, and I come up with a little bit of a cold when I'm forced, which on top of everything else is great. At any rate, it was hard to pick what a couple little stories to tell. But I think I found a couple that are good. And one thing that Joe and I never did and always wanted to do was climb up the St. Joe steeple. And I think, I don't know who here did, but you did, Joe? We tried. Many times we tried. And we got in trouble a few times too. But at any rate, we did get up in the Holy Names Dome. And we got up there more than once. But one time didn't work out very well. And we were with David. And he's older than both of us, so we tried to blame it on him. But at any rate, we're up there. And I'm sure a lot of you have been up in the Holy Names Dome, but it's a beautiful view. It's spectacular up there. And we're up there and just having a great time. And all of a sudden you look down and there's a couple black and white specks down there on the sidewalk. And all of a sudden we heard, you know, it's nuns, and so we're busted. And they don't just say, get down from there. They say, you meat boys, get down right now. How the hell are we meat boys? Joe ducks, thinking he was invisible. I was frozen in terror. David, do you remember? You hopped over the rail and disappeared. I mean, Holy Names. I don't know where you went, David. But, anyway, the nun said, get down here right now, meat boys, or I'm going to walk up and talk to your mother. That never turned out well. So anyway, we went down, we talked to the nuns, it was awful. And by the way, we accidentally spilled a little paint up there. I don't know how that happened. So we're talking to the nuns, and they say, you have to go home, tell your parents, and if they don't call me within a half hour, I will be at your back door. Oh, you remember, David? So we go up the alley to our house. We're right by Holy Names. We go up the alley, come in the backyard, and what happens? There's Mom and Dad in the backyard. Mom is humming. Dad's whistling. They're working on something. They're in the best mood we've ever seen them in. Which means Stephen and George were not getting in trouble. Or no phone calls, no nothing. They were just so happy. Oh, no. And, I mean, that was a long walk up the alley. And Mom was, oh, hello. How are you boys doing? Oh, well. So we had to tell them, and their mood changed instantly. It was not pretty at all. And so we had to, it was bad, and they had to call the nuns and talk to them, and that's when they found out, oh, there's some cleanup to be done up there. And, which was an accident. So we got to go back and clean it up, which was kind of cool to go up in the dome, but except Dad said, do not look at the view, do not do anything, just clean up and get back home. And then, irony of ironies, which I still can't believe, to make sure that we did what we were supposed to, clean it up, and get back home, they sent Stephen to supervise us. So we can laugh about it now. It was not, well, it might have been funny to you, Stephen. It wasn't to David and Joey and me, that's for sure. So anyway, that's Holy Names, and if you've never been up in the dome, it is spectacular. I never made it up on top. Anyway, the next one involves Forest Ridge, because a lot of us and a lot of you served Mass at Forest Ridge. And we always got a nice breakfast afterwards, which was really cool. And, well, but anyway, there was a one, and it's the only one I remember from Forest Ridge, and any of you Forest Ridge girls can correct me, but I remember there was a Mother Desmond, and I don't know what she was like to those of you who went to Forest Ridge, but she made Joe and I very nervous. Even when we weren't doing anything, she made us very nervous. She was tough, and she always had that look like, I know you guys are up to something. And we were, but at any rate, we found out where they kept the host, the unconsecrated host, back in the sacristy. And, I mean, nothing's more cool than to go up to St. Joe's Playground and show people a bunch of hosts. They're unconsecrated, but they're unconsecrated, trust me. So anyway, we had a pretty good system. One of us would watch and the other one would take care of business. And I think Joe was watching, because he wouldn't have done what I did. And all of a sudden he said, whoa, whoa, which I knew what that meant. And she had snuck in another way. And I had my hands in them, put them in my pockets, and she said, "You boys, stand up." And I mean, it was scary, very scary. Mother Desmond was frightening, still is. But so she said, "Have you boys been stealing hosts?" And we both at the same time said, "No, Mother Desmond." And as I'm saying it, I look down and there's about 20 of them by my feet. So Mother Desmond was not happy with us at all. We tried to tell her they weren't consecrated, but it didn't work with her, just like it didn't work with you, Mark. Okay, and then the next story is just a quick one about Joe. At the end of high school, either between junior, senior year, or right after, he and his other pal, Chris McAvoy, decided to go into business together. And I talked with Chris about this a couple weeks ago at Matt Smith's movie premiere. And we had a good laugh about it then. But our cousin Bill Allwell owned a house on Harrison, the Harrison House, between 12th and 13th. And near where the Gildos have a building, right? Somewhere near there. Anyway, this house, they needed to have painted. And Chris and Joe had just opened a business of house painting. So they hired him. It was not, Bill was a smart businessman, but that was a bad hire. And they made a deal about like a cost plus type deal. And they had it down, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had it down where they didn't work at all day long. But they knew right when the guys were going to be coming home. And when they came home every day, they were on the ladders working away. They're saying, "How come you're always working and nothing is getting done?" So anyway, it was about a 2-week job that took 4 months. And I think they found where those guys kept their beer, their cigarettes, their whatever. And I just drove by it a couple days ago to look at it. That is the nastiest, rattiest house, right?
But it's still painted from
Yeah, and it still has the original paint job from about 1970. Yeah,
the same job.
same paint job.
Same stains on the gut where we spilled the paint.
Yeah, that's a nasty house, though. They've got weeds growing out of the gutters. It's terrible. But the paint job, as ugly as I thought it was, it's still there. So good job, Chris. Okay. Anyway, after high school, Joe joined the Army, and he didn't have to stay in very long because Vietnam ended. Thank God. Jesus, it takes us so long to get out of these stupid wars. But anyway. And not to rant about that, but it helps. It's emotional talking about Joe, but give me a break. I mean, 10 years on these damn wars. And anyway, it helped Joe. And instead of sending the kids over there like they did, and they're still doing, and have been doing, the bastards. Anyway, Joe was trained to go to Vietnam and drive. I believe they were a Vulcan Arterial, and he was going to go, except the war ended. So he got out and started working, and that's when he, after working for several years, he met our friend Mike Drobka, and left ONC, worked for Samson, Northland, and all that rest is history that I'm not going to talk about. But wrapping it up, I think, Joe was passionate. For those of you who don't know, he was passionate about politics. Passionate. And Joe had, he didn't call them opinions. He had what was straight out black and white fact, by God. And I agreed with almost everything that he did, so we never had problems with politics. But he felt very strongly about it. And his favorite show, about 5 in the morning, is the C-SPAN. Anyone that's ever stayed over, no, it's on really, really early, weekend journal, weekday journal. And he loved it. So when I'd come out from Chicago, and I'd be on East Coast time, I'd get up early sometimes, and I'd be up before him, and I'd go down for coffee, and I'd say, let's see what's on ESPN. And Joe would come down. ESPN's on, I'm checking out scores and waiting for him to come down. And he comes down and he just stops. He's in shock. Absolute shock that something other than C-SPAN would be on at that time in the morning. And Rocky's down there, and Rocky looks at Joe, looks at me, looks at the TV, and just looks at me. Rocky knew there was a real problem there, but anyway, Joe loved politics, and we spent a lot of time back east with Bill Allwell and Eddie. And Bill loved politics too, and they talked about it a lot. And Bill, God bless him, he would say to Joe a lot, I said this last week when we were at the hospital, Joe had such strong views. Bill agreed with Bill most of the time. But Bill said, geez, Joe, you really feel strong about that. You know what you are? And then he started saying this a lot. You're not always right, Joe, but you are never in doubt. And that was Joe. And John mentioned the comments that were really, really nice. And Cindy Johnson wrote one about when she used to be up at the Safeway, and how rough Joe was. He'd come in there and all that, but Cindy never had any of that from Joe. She went right through that, would talk to Joe, and she's right, he's a teddy bear inside. Anyway, with all the grandkids, with the Drop Your Girls, with John and Gail's granddaughter, grandson, all you have to do is look at them, and they love Joe, and Joe loved them, loved the kids. And at the end, Joe very bravely faced a terrifying disease. And he had the kind of courage and strength the last day, which was a lot sooner than we all thought, that I would hope to have in any circumstance. So, farewell, Joe. Underway.
Joseph Xavier Meade. Joey, our X-Man. Meade, number 5. If you wrote our 9 names in a column, George, Mary, Stephen, David, Joey, Mark, Teresa, Casey, and John, and then drew a line down through them, and then another line across the middle, it would go through Joey's name and form a cross. Put a curve on the bottom, and it would be an anchor. We are here today celebrating that hold that he had on each one of us. Our family became Team Joe X after his difficult diagnosis last spring. I'm going to focus on one part of the person he was, our brother, St. Joseph the Worker. I have a little reading that has helped me from time to time through the years, and I believe Joey exemplified this essay. Work. If you are poor, work. If you are rich, continue to work. If you are burdened with seemingly unfair responsibilities, work. If you are happy, keep right on working. If disappointments come, work. If sorrow overwhelms you, work. When faith falters and reason fails, just work. When dreams are shattered and hopes are dashed, work. Work as if your life were in peril. It really is. No matter what ails you, work. Work faithfully. Work with faith. Work is the greatest remedy available. Be thankful every morning when you get up that you have something to do, which must be done. Work will breed in you diligence, determination, strength of will, and 100 other virtues which the idle will never know. Thank you for your work ethic, Joey. He handled the last year of his life with courage, grace, strength, and work. But it was not all work and no play for Joe. He did enjoy his relaxation times, especially with his favorite drink. I think it's the same as mine, Pepsi. Joe loved to read. He had to get books hot off the press. No waiting around for paperback editions for him. Luckily, the Kindle was invented because the instant gratification of new book buying was taking too long. He started Toby and me reading some of his favorite authors. Joey loved animals, and going through dozens of Dad's slides, I was amazed at how much dogs were a part of our family's life. I think Joey is the one who started Mom and Dad on all their little hot dogs. He sure loved his rock star Rocky and Rocky's sister Bailey. But some animals were not his friend. Therefore, they became other useful things. Like bear rugs, steel throws, box blankets, and of course the stuffed beaver displayed in the doorway at the farm, which initially scares young children and then they climb all over it. Here is an example of something he gave to Teresa and me one Christmas. Joey cared about feeding the hummingbirds, and they cared about getting their sugar water. Whoever was at the farm was supposed to refresh the feeders. No excuses because he had a 50-pound bag of sugar candy. Joe was a lefty in his handwriting, in sports, in politics, and now with us. He left us behind. It was an honor and a privilege to be with Liz and my family surrounding Joey with love during his last hours of life. Our brother, our middle man, our Joey. So young, so strong, so handsome. Anchors away, Joey. We will try to hold fast. God bless you.
My name is George Mead. I'm the eldest, but I'm following in the Mead tradition of shy, retiring speakers. So bear with my modesty. 1 week and 3 days ago, we were around Joe's hospital bed at Harborview, and there were abundant tears, and I'm not even counting Mary and Teresa and Liz. But again, in the Mead way, it's pretty hard to let more than 15 or 20 minutes go before what my mother would call a smart remark. And she didn't mean smart in an encouraging way. So one of the smart remarks that as we were around Joe's bed, someone thought it might be amusing to make sure he was dead by putting Fox News on. And there was no reaction at all. So we started talking and praising about teabaggers. And again, no response, which meant that Joe had almost left the planet at that point. As Mark has said, and Mary, Joe was a huge liberal, and he was a huge union supporter. It just about killed him when he, in his view, the Boeing agreement was ratified, and he felt impotent and enraged, and that was, I've seen him passionate before, but that was he was beyond he was beyond wrath at that point. One of the reasons that I bring that up is that we, curving back to smart remarks, we talk. I feel like going right after her in a good way. Anyway, Joe was an altar boy, and he was a student at St. Joe's and Seattle Prep, and as soon as he left Seattle Prep, or very near after that, he decided that Catholicism left him wanting something different, like no Catholicism. So, in my mind, I started thinking about how it was going to work out at St. Peter's kiosk, and I was thinking, well, Joe's obviously not the only one that dies. It's probably more like a TSA situation where they guide you into various alleys, and some of them have a quick access pass, and others get strip searched. And I think Joe was in the latter category. And I'm imagining how he would justify getting through the gate when, in my mind, I heard this kind of creaky metal gate with a cane on the end of it pushing open. And when St. Peter turned around, our dad said, "I've got it. Joe, get in here now." And then the gate came back. It's kind of a testament to both Dad and Joe that all Dad really wanted from his children in life was to be a good Catholic, and Joe, one of the many times we talked about this, I think I was beefing at one point when we came back from New York about I've been going to Mass, as Stephen and Nancy were too, and occasionally Casey. But Dad wanted me to do something else. He wanted me to participate in the liturgy commission. I said, well, I thought we were doing pretty well with just showing up at Sunday Mass. And Joe said, that is why I am not going to Mass ever. And I told Dad that. And I told him because if you give him an inch and he'll take a mile. He said, it's not going to be the end, I promise you. And Joe was very right. He said, it's just easier to say no right at the beginning. Joe had a relationship with Dad that, well, we all had loving relationships with Mom and Dad, but Joe's devotion to the farm and to Dad, even though he, out of Dad's hearing, he said all of his work is basically spent fixing stuff that Dad screwed up, and that was the sanitized version of it. But Dad and Joe worked hand in hand, and because Joe cared so much about it, Dad completely trusted what Joe's choices were, and to have Dad, who would probably take a rosary and yank it around Joe's neck and drag him up to St. Hubert, he respected Joe. And when Dad was in his last months, we were talking, and he mentioned about Joe that Joe's not the only Meade sibling that goes to Mass less occasionally than weekly. But he said that Joe turned out just the way he would have wanted to. And that is saying something with Dad. So I'd like to leave my comments with it's a quote, and it's a Shakespearean quote, so Pamela, correct me if I'm wrong. But our good friend, our dear friend Steve Williams died about 3 years ago. And Joe was a good friend of his, as he was all the Meade brothers. And at Steve's memorial, I said the same thing. From Julius Caesar's Mark Antony oration, the evil that men do lives on, but the good is oft interred with the bones, meaning that we remember the bad stuff and we discount the good stuff. Well, what Joe did is he got rid of the business of bones being interred, because one of his last acts was not only to give up his corneas to deserving patients waiting for them, but he donated his body to the University of Washington Medical Center, and he gave the last full measure of devotion. So,
I'm Teresa. I'm Joey's younger sister, and I never knew he transitioned from Joe to Joey until now. I didn't know why everybody called him Joe, but he's always been Joey to me. Not only are Joey and I brother and sister, but our dogs are also brother and sister. Rocky and Bailey, yellow labs, the best dogs in the world. Joey had Rocky, and I heard him call him Rockstar when he thought no one was listening. And we have Bailey. John and Gail Gildo watch Rocky while Joey works summer seasons in Alaska. And the rest of the year, we took Rocky each week when Joey would come down from the farm on Whidbey to spend a few days in Seattle. Now, while Joey is known as a man's man, it's also clear that he's a dog's man. He came to our office in Edmonds each week to drop or pick up Rocky, and he was always cheerful and greeted us. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Ward. Hi, Julie. Hi, Maddie. We have a family business. But when it came to Bailey, it was, Bailey girl! What a pretty girl! Who wants a cookie? Don't they feed you? What a good girl! Joey took Bailey to the farm with Rocky a few times, and Bailey never forgot. She would wait in eager anticipation / borderline anxiety to see if Joey would invite her into his car. When the invitation wasn't exactly forthcoming, Bailey would lay down behind Joey's car so he couldn't back up and leave without running her over. I told Joey that her life wasn't worth living if she couldn't go with him. I came across these words yesterday. May your character not be a writing upon the sand, but an inscription upon the rock. Joey leaves us with his example as a devoted son, faithful brother, uncle, and friend. Joey was strong, courageous, and unwavering, with a tender side. In those ways, he was a lot like our dad. We love Joey. One of the things I miss most about Joey is the sound of his great voice. Last month, he phoned from Alaska, and I just missed his call and was so disappointed because he was in a remote area in Alaska with little reception. But now I'm thankful because I have his message, and I'll leave you with the sound of his voice.
Hi, Teresa. Lee, happy birthday.
I'm Stephen, one of Joe's older brothers, and John promised there might be some farm stories, so I got a couple of those. I didn't have a lot of interaction with Joe, mostly adult life. He was doing his stuff, I was doing my stuff, and there'd always be family get-togethers and stuff, but no kind of one-on-one bonding. Until a couple years ago, and I had occasion to be able to go up to the farm, and I started going up to the farm a lot. And so Joey was at the farm a lot, so we got to see how things worked out like that. And he was finishing up his cabin at the farm. There's a board of it, and there is different progression as it got built. And my brother David would be up there doing some plumbing, and my brother Casey would be doing some framing. And I wanted to be some help, and he wasn't one to turn down help, so he let me carry scraps of wood to a burn pile, and I got to do that. So he gets the cabin finished, and this could have been just me, but I would notice some looks from him, because it's like every time he was coming to the farm, I was there too. And he wasn't greeting me like he greeted Teresa's dogs. But again, it could have been me. Well, okay, so I'm up there quite a bit now, and I made some friends in Langley. Long story, but I belong to this club, and so where people do a lot of things, mostly they don't drink. And so I got to know some people, and they would come to the farm. And, I'd make a friend would come to the farm, another one, they'd come to say hi, have a cup of coffee or whatever. And pretty soon a lot of people started coming, and Joey would walk by, whatever he's doing, and he might see this, for example, this tattooed up girl crying about her son that was taken away from her from CPS and had just died. Or he might walk by and somebody's talking about they're in a terrible relationship they can't get out of. Or the next person wants to get in a relationship but nobody will have them. And so Joey came over one morning, and he's really tactful. He said, "Stephen, you have weird friends, and I don't know if I want them here." And I was thinking, gosh, can't he just tell me what's on his mind? So he goes back to his cabin, and I'm thinking about what he said. And maybe not everybody here knows this, but I'm a really spiritual guy. I'm an ordained minister. And worldly things don't bother me. So as I started to think what he had to say to me, I got furious. I'm thinking, how dare he talk to me that way? And so I went inside and I thought, okay, I'm just getting my suitcase, just to hell with everything. I'm never coming up here again. I can do the 2-year-old thing. But instead I called Nancy and I said, "Hey Nancy, Joey said that I've got weird friends, and he doesn't know if he's comfortable with them coming down to the farm." And there was a long pause, and Nancy said, "Your friends are weird." And she said, "Think about them." And so we went over them too, and I thought, oh, she's right, they are weird, but they're nice. And then what happened, and I don't see him here, but he'd be here in spirit. There's a friend from Capitol Hill that moved up to Whidbey, Iowa, that Joey really likes. And that guy came down to see me. And Joey was a little bit puzzled. And he said, "You guys are friends?" And I said, "Oh yeah, we're good friends." And he said, "He knows all these people that are coming down?" I said, "Yeah, he's been friends with them longer than I have." And he was, huh. And after that, all was well. Whidbey, it was nice, we're sitting out on the deck, or we're having a cup of coffee, and Joey would come in, and he wouldn't join in the conversation too much, but he might offer some sage advice, like he said, "Did you guys ever think of just not drinking?"
ever occur to you to just like get a job? So, and they liked him too. So I started to have this kind of relationship with Joey that, again, I hadn't had in all these years. And one thing that happened was I got to know Joey's dear friend up there, Roy, so much better. Roy was over at the farm every day. Roy helped Mom and Dad. Roy and Joey were, I was thick as something, but Roy was always helping on the farm. And Roy would come in and we'd have a cup of coffee. He knew all my friends too, and so that helped. And Roy and I is Roy still here? I didn't see his. It might affect what I have to say. But Roy and I had this deal going, and it was who could irritate Joey first, and who could irritate him the most. And I'm thinking, hey, hands down, man. Yeah, like, this is going to be difficult. And so Roy and I would talk about different things that we thought irritated Joey and who was like, what the score was. Roy ended up winning. This was just the other day. What Roy did, even for a meet, would have been I don't know if we would have gone this route. But when Roy was leaving Joey, and this is the last time Joey was ever at the farm, Roy would say, Joey, he would yell at him. Roy called him Joe. Joe! And Joe would look up and Roy said, I love you. And Joe would say, you can't say that. And Roy said, I love you. And he did. He did. And I thought, okay, Roy, how can I top that? so we had our laugh about that. And I was with Roy when Joey went underway. We were up at the farm, and we walked the farm, and we were waiting for different texts and phone calls from Brother George. And it was a holy time. We could feel the presence of Mom and Dad, and of course Roy knew them so well too. And we could feel the presence of Joey. And at one point, he's like, Roy's checking things out with me. He said, "This presence, do you feel like it's disapproving?" And of course it wasn't. We were just laughing. And so when I left the farm, now to come down for all these festivities, I got to tell Roy, I love you, and I said that for Joey, for me too, but I got to give him a I love you back from Joey. And one more quick thing. Joey was real particular about the machinery on the farm, and it didn't take him long, but he certified me to use the lawnmower. So I had full certification and authorization to use the lawnmower. Later on, I got certified by Joey to use the blue tractor because it also had the log splitter on it, and no problem there. And before the last, in fact, I was at the farm the last time Joey was there, and we were talking about things as he was going up to Alaska, and I'm just asking him, what about this field? Because he's got this big brush cutter bulldozer thing, and he said, actually, I'm the one, I like to just use that myself. But he said, Roy knows about it, and he said, John knows all the machinery. He said, I didn't teach John, but he still knows. And he said, Casey can work most of it. Casey thinks he knows. So he said, I don't know if you need to. And I thought, well, okay, I was just trying to help. And the last big project at the farm that Joey did was a huge, it was good-sized logging thing. We took out 7 big semis full of logs. And that's a lot of trees down and a lot of mess, and it was a lot of work real fast. And they had at the farm, they had bulldozers and tractors and backhoes and all sorts of things with levers that any guy would like. And Joey's kind of putting out the assignments to the different people up there. You do this, you do that. And finally there's just me. And I'm thinking, well, there's still some big tractor-looking things that haven't been started up yet. And I said, what? And he said, Stephen, he said, can you usually pick up the loose branches in the field, throw them on the burn pile. And I'm thinking, God, you know, I don't get to like do levers and foot pedals and stuff. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, but hey, that's an important job, right? And he said, not really, but he said, it'll give you something to do. And when he would leave and I'd be up there, he always left me something to do. And in my mind, I always thought it was important. So that's my story, the farm story of Joe.
Well, this is tough. But one thing I can say about Joe is he was fiercely loyal. He always backed up what he said, and he didn't always approve of what other people did if their opinions were different than his, but he was very loyal. I'll never forget, I believe it was the summer of 1969 when a lot of the family was down at Lake Cushman, and my dad would pop up occasionally after Longacres for a night. And I don't know where Stephen was. He was out and about, and I was out quite late, and I saw that Dad was home when I was coming home. It was maybe 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and so I took the mead emergency entrance into the house. I climbed up the side of the chimney to the roof over the porch, and then grabbed on the gutter to the 3rd floor and pulled myself up to that level. And Joe was asleep in front of this little sliding window up there, and I tapped on the window and just scared the bejesus out of Joe. I mean, he was just startled. "What are you doing out there?" I said, "I want to come in, but Dad's home and he'll hear me if I come from downstairs." So he says, "Oh, get out of here." So I climbed in through the window and crept down the 3rd floor stairs and opened the door, and it creaks, and Dad says, "David, what are you doing?" "I was up talking with Joe." And Joe never ratted me out of my unconventional entrance into the house. But Joe is just extremely loyal to people he worked with, to all of us, and to all of his friends. And it's just not fair that he's not happily spending his time with us and at the farm. And we miss him.
Whatever. I cannot believe that Kathleen believed all the crap that those boys told her, but she loved those boys. That's not my boys. One time, Joe and I, and actually there's a few people from prep here, yeah, that remember this story about pushing that car over the cliff into the ravine. Yeah, you were there. So we pushed this car over. I was steering it, Joe's pushing on the back and all this. We pushed it over the cliff, and hopefully one of the kids isn't here. All of a sudden we get pulled into the office because, oh my God, you could have killed somebody. The thing went down over the ravine, down all the way to the next street. It was an old piece of crap car sitting there where we smoke. And we don't want to smoke in this goddamn car. So anyway, we pushed that car over, and sure enough, we get called into the next day to Father, it was Goebel. Goebel comes in, and we're sitting there, and he's up on the podium and everything, and Joe just looks at him and says, "What do you mean? Who saw us push this car over the cliff?" And it was like, Goebel says, "Well, we have an eyewitness." Joe just adamantly, you know, Joe, he's so adamant, he says, "Who? I have a right to address my accusers." And I'm sitting back there just with my mouth shut saying, "Who the hell is this? You know, we did it, Joe. Come on, let's get over with it. Let's do the punishment. Let's get some hacks." Joe just said, no. I want to talk to him, and I don't know if Bill, what's his name? Gaeta, I remember his name, but anyway, he was the one that squealed on us. Of course, he wasn't going to tell anyone. Joe was just adamant about that. Sure enough, Father Bischoff said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to get him, and then you guys are going to come back in here, and you're going to hear it." We never heard word one from him. Joe just talked his way out of it. He just kept admitting that. And I'm telling you that was the way Joe was. He wanted to see that guy that said, you know, that squealed on him. And not only would it have been bad for him, but it would have been, you know,
it would have been bad for all of us if he would have squealed on us. But he never came forward. We got off. I can't believe that we got off. We graduated and everything else. There's a few people that hear from that Joe. Somebody wants to mention a few the classmates of Joe that are here. If we get a picture of anybody that went to school with Joe, any of his classmates can come up here and say hi. We can get a picture up here somewhere. I think. Oh, Liz hasn't talked yet. I'm sorry. Where is Liz? Anyway, thank you. Joe, I love you.
I'm Liz Olson, and I was blessed to be Joe's girlfriend for about 20 years, with a big break somewhere in the middle. We met in high school through my twin brother John, who went to Seattle Prep with Joe. We were 17 when I asked him to a Holy Names Tolo dance, unaware that the Mead boys were big on dancing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Liz, but can we be quiet back here a little bit? There's some people here that can't hear. This could be it. This is Liz Gildo. Olson. So please, just let her have her say.
Ow!
I took Joe to the dance, and he had big mutton chop sideburns, and he had his trademark leather coat, and he had a huge belt buckle with a big beetle on it. And I thought he was so cool. We were together through our late teens and our 20s, sometimes off for short periods, but mostly on. We became engaged and booked a church 3 times, but we took turns getting cold feet and never quite made it to the altar. One of my favorite memories to look back on from our younger days was in 1977. We were 23, and it was definitely when we were on. Joe drove us to Mexico in his '56 Chev. While he drove, I sewed some fringe trim, you know, those little hanging fabric balls, around the headliner above the windows, and glued a spring-mounted bobbling crab to the dashboard. And once we got to Tijuana, he randomly put a coin in a gumball prize machine and won a cheap adjustable plastic ring. It inspired us to track down an attorney named Pedro Flores, who performed a marriage by proxy for $35. It seemed like a fortune at the time, but we pooled our money. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't legal, but I managed to hold on to this marriage certificate for the last 37 years. Then we slowly drove down the bad roads on the Baja coast towards Cabo San Lucas and eventually back toward home. Lucky for me, a young woman in love with a thirst for adventure. There had been a big storm and the roads washed out north of La Paz. There was a 3-week wait before the cars could pass, and Joe had to get back to work at ONC. The ferry to Guaymas on the mainland was booked for 2 weeks, and only trucks with perishable foods were allowed on. Joe bartered with a truck driver, guided us down a dark alley, unloaded the dried fish he was hauling, and used a couple of boards to move Joe's Chev back up onto the truck bed. They let some air out of his tires and covered the car with dried fish. Our cover-up worked and we made it onto the next ferry, and somehow I even convinced Joe to dance with me that night on the ferry boat. We got to Guaymas in the morning. When we offloaded the fish, Joe drove his car down the road. I'm Liz Olson, and I was blessed to be Joe's girlfriend for about 20 years, with a big break somewhere in the middle. We met in high school through my twin brother John, who went to Seattle Prep with Joe. We were 17 when I asked him to a Holy Names Tolo dance, unaware that the Mead boys weren't big on dancing.
I'm sorry to interrupt Liz, but can we be quiet back here a little bit? There's some people here that can't hear. This could be it. This is Liz Gildo. Olson. So please, just let her have her say.
I took Joe to the dance, and he had big mutton chop sideburns, and he had his trademark leather coat, and he had a huge belt buckle with a big beetle on it. And I thought he was so cool. We were together through our late teens and our 20s, sometimes off for short periods, but mostly on. We became engaged and booked a church 3 times, but we took turns getting cold feet and never quite made it to the altar. One of my favorite memories to look back on from our younger days was in 1977. We were 23, and it was definitely when we were on. Joe drove us to Mexico in his '56 Chev. While he drove, I sewed some fringe trim, you know, those little hanging fabric balls, around the headliner above the windows and glued a spring-mounted bobbling crab to the dashboard. And once we got to Tijuana, he randomly put a coin in a gumball prize machine and won a cheap adjustable plastic ring. It inspired us to track down an attorney named Pedro Flores, who performed a marriage by proxy for $35. It seemed like a fortune at the time, but we pooled our money. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't legal, but I managed to hold on to this marriage certificate for the last 37 years. Then we slowly drove down the bad roads on the Baja coast towards Cabo San Lucas and eventually back toward home. Lucky for me, a young woman in love with a thirst for adventure. There had been a big storm and the roads washed out north of La Paz. There was a 3-week wait before the cars could pass, and Joe had to get back to work at ONC. The ferry to Guaymas on the mainland was booked for 2 weeks, and only trucks with perishable foods were allowed on. Joe bartered with a truck driver who guided us down a dark alley, unloaded the dried fish he was hauling, and used a couple of boards to move Joe's Chev back up onto the truck bed. They let some air out of his tires and covered the car with dried fish. Our cover-up worked and we made it onto the next ferry, and somehow I even convinced Joe to dance with me that night on the ferry boat. We got to Guaymas in the morning. When we offloaded the fish, Joe drove his car down the ramp, and because the tires didn't have much air in them, he bottomed out and knocked off the muffler. Needless to say, the long ride up the coast was really loud. The car smelled like fish, and his green and white paint job was ruined from the salt. But that trip with him remains the highlight of my young adult life. We separated in our late 20s for 2 decades, then bumped into each other again 8 years ago and renewed our friendship. He was back and forth to Alaska, so it took a few months to really get to know each other again. He still wore the same big belt buckle. His hair had more salt and pepper, and I still thought he was so cool. A few months after we started spending time together, we shared a snowy day outside of the farm, and he finally put his arm around me when we went in to watch his TV girlfriend, Rachel Maddow. His arm around my shoulder, in my mind at least, officially upgraded my status from friend to girlfriend. I was thrilled. I was lost in my excitement, dreaming about our life together like I was 23 again. All the while, I'm pretty sure the only thing on Joe's mind was driving home before the roads closed because of snow. And that's how our last 8 years were together, kind of like Mars and Venus. He was tight with his affection, but so generous with his gifts of laughter and comfort. And that's how Joe showed his love for others. When Joe was diagnosed with cancer 16 months ago, we went through his treatment and his surgery, and I'm sure he had a lot of bad days when he didn't feel good. But he never complained. He would greet me in the morning asking, "How are you? How did you sleep?" Lots of evenings when he had no appetite, he'd ask, "Can I get you some ice cream?" He was full of bravery and grateful for every day of life. He accepted his diagnosis with courage and fulfilled his goal to work for as long as possible. Joe was a man's man till the day he died, and that's how I will always remember him. Whether it's knocking over trees with his big loader, splitting wood, milling logs into boards, driving his tractor, or showing love for others through actions instead of words. I'll hold on to those memories like I've held on to this marriage certificate. And I know that they'll carry me through the next 37 years. Please join me in a toast to Joe.
Me again, but only because Joe's best friend growing up, Richard Sifferman's not here. But any of you who know Richard, he and Joe were very, very close from the time I can remember. And I had a couple long talks with Richard this week, and he sent me something that he wanted me to read, so I'm going to read it. And when we talked about it, he said, "You were there on a couple of those things, Mark, so if you want to add any comments or deny anything, go ahead." So I will. So here's Richard Sifferman. If any of you knew Richard, he would be here if he could. Wonderful man. First of all, let me say that I deeply regret not being there at my good friend Joe's celebration of life. I would have enjoyed immensely visiting with family and friends and sharing laughs and fond memories we all have of Joe. He was a good man and a good friend with whom I shared many experiences and adventures throughout our childhood and early adulthood. Even though I have 6 brothers of my own, I chose him to be my best man, and in parentheses, at my first wedding. That's how highly I regarded Joe. To say that Joe and I were mischievous kids is a bit of an understatement. And if you knew Richard and if you knew Joe, it's a huge understatement. That's my comment. Our golden rule was, if you don't get caught, it didn't happen. So basically, don't get caught. We were pretty good at that, but every now and then we had to resort to rule number 2. Blame someone else. All you Capitol Hill people know exactly what he's talking about. That actually worked out fairly well. I mean, throughout it all, my folks still liked Joe, and his folks still liked me. Amazing. We had lots of adventures growing up, but one in particular seems to stand out. It must have been the summer of '68 or '69. I think I will call it the summer of liberation. It had been suggested that we take advantage of our folks' Elks Club membership and use the swimming pool at the Lake Union facility. Great idea. A fun activity to keep us busy and out of trouble. Not even close. In fact, I don't even know what our parents were thinking. But it didn't take long, however, to find that a certain Van de Kamp's Bakery was located near the southeast end of Lake Union, right on the way to the Elks Club. Warm summer day, hot bakery ovens, back door left open, kids with a sweet tooth. It's safe to say we liberated many pastries that summer. I think we even talked Mark into going in and actually gave him a shopping list. Bear claws, apple fritters, cinnamon rolls, butter horns. Little brothers are great. How lucky can you get? Joe and I weren't a very good influence on sweet, innocent young Mark. I wrote that sentence. Not long after that, we noticed an abandoned and condemned ferry or cruise ship of some kind that had been turned into a restaurant. I think it was called the Surfside Nine, I'm not sure. It was right on Lake Union there. It was listing badly and had a gangplank extending from the shore, boarded up, posted all over, danger, keep out, no trespassing, do not enter. I believe that there was a dispute with the city. They turned off the electricity or something in the boat. It was listed badly, thank you. To 14-year-olds, that's not a deterrent. It's an invitation. So we squeezed through the barricade and the chained up doors to do some exploring. Our efforts paid off when we found a half-full cigarette machine in one of the rooms. Jackpot! The mother lode. Needless to say, we liberated many packs of Terrytons, Pall Malls, Lucky Strikes, Old Gold, you name it. So what if some were damp and musty? Sometimes free trumps everything. Now we had cigarettes to smoke after eating our donuts. And my good friend Mark Steele, I think Peter, maybe Danny, I don't know. You guys know what they're talking about. Finally, we discovered that Mr. Potter, I don't know if Paul's still here, but this is good. Mr. Potter kept a generous stash of Rainiers on his back porch. I believe they were Oldies, but Richard thought they were Rainiers. So, anyway, obviously there was some beer that needed to be liberated. The trick was to only take a few so it wouldn't be noticed. Now that's what I call self-control. Poor Gene was none the wiser. But I think Carol, Paul, and Steve sure knew about it. We all did. So, now we had what seemed to be an endless supply of beer, cigarettes, and donuts. Does it get any better than that? Oh, the summer of liberation. Now, I don't mean to sound like we were really bad, terrible kids. I mean, after all, we were altar boys, for crying out loud. Which goes to show that it's all part of God's plan. He knew we would need forgiveness frequently. When we got to prep, Joe seemed to lose a little bit of his focus on the golden rule, the one about don't get caught. He set the record for hacks in our class, or was it the whole school? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure either way, but either way it was very impressive. I remember one time talking to Mr. Boley in the hallway. Joe was standing behind me, giving me certain hand gestures. What are those, Frenchie? Apparently, Joe was not aware of Mr. Boley's, who's now Father Boley, Mr. Boley's extraordinary peripheral vision. Off he goes to Father Sitter. All joking aside, I admired and respected Joe for his toughness and work ethic. He had a great sense of humor. His smile was infectious, his laugh unmistakable. He was good with his hands, loved taking things apart and putting them back together. He loved fixing things, building things. He loved operating any type of equipment. Forklifts, cranes, backhoes, tractors, the bigger, the better. If it had an engine, he could operate it. He was a good man and a great friend. I am fortunate to have so many memories to look back on and smile and laugh. I love Joe Meade. Take a cup. Okay. I love Joe Meade. I love the Meade family. God bless you all. Richard.
really blessed today. The tag team is big. So we have some friends, class of 72 at Prep. Many of you are here. Those who aren't here are here thinking about Joe. We had a friend that is really hard to come by. Someone like our dear friend Joe. I was a poor white boy from North Seattle, Wedgwood area. Thank you. When I got to Seattle Prep, up to that time, my name was Mark. Since then, I have a different nickname, Frenchie, and that stayed with me, and certainly Joe is a big part of that. It's really hard to describe the type of friendship that you have with someone like Joe, but I'm going to try. And Andy, John, and hopefully others are going to help me.
Joe was a core element. Joe was one of those people Joe was one of those core type people around which entire social groups will form. Now, in the strata of Seattle Prep, there was the North End gang, which was a very strong gang. There was the Capitol Hill gang, another strong gang, a smaller gang from Queen Anne, and then I was the guy from Magnolia. A group of one. And so it was incumbent upon me to go reconnect with my roots, my true roots of Capitol Hill, and then find all these people that knew how to party in the North End.
So those of us that were from suburbs such as Magnolia and Wedgwood, the Capitol Hill experience was unique and continues to resonate with us. The Capitol Hill group that we think of, we go up to Capitol Hill as freshmen and we think, what is going on up here? This was a group that knew how to party. This was a group that had connections, many different connections through and through.
I'll give you an idea. In 1969, we've already heard how the entire V family was engaged in petty larceny, learning how to become career criminals, and learning how to destroy the institution of Seattle Prep. I, on the other hand, was a Boy Scout at Boy Scout camp, and they put me with these guys for 4 years. What do you think happened?
Today, Andy and I had a chance to go up to Seattle Prep. We decided to explore the campus. We had not been up there, either of us, I think, since 1972. And we walked through the halls of Seattle Prep. We, first of all, made sure we went by the principal's office, where we often bent over and took our punishment. I knew that I was against incredible competition when Joe, within the first month or two, received, I don't remember how many hats. For those of you that don't know about hacks, the Jesuit priests had a wonderful wooden paddle. Well, I'll leave it at that. But Joe set the tone, and from there we knew that we had a close friendship. I want to just talk a little bit about Joe and loyalty. Joe was always there. 34, 44, 94 years ago, Joe became a friend, and from day one, he was there. You knew that he was your friend. He knew he didn't judge you. You knew that he did not judge you. You knew that through whatever your life experiences were, he was going to be there for you. Many of us here experienced that and had the chance to find and feel Joe. Joe was a tough guy. So today, when we think that Joe's not here, it's all the tougher, because this is a guy who was tough. He was going to last. He's not here. You are. We're here to celebrate Joe's life, and we're here to celebrate the kind of friendships that someone like Joe brings to us. God bless you, Joe.
Joe also had me up at the farm. We've heard several farm stories from Joe, and I've been impressed how people worked levers and heavy equipment and did all this wonderful work up at the farm. And I wonder about how it is that Joe came to choose me for shoveling cow shit every time I went up to the farm. I found that I got very good at following behind the tractor with this large sled, and Joe would say, "Hurry up, there's more, come on, get them in here." And over the course of 3 or 4 visits to the farm, I learned 2 things. Shoveling shit is hard work, and I better find something else to do in life. Joe, in his car, cars. We not only had the car that went over the cliff, we also had the one that blocked the exit to the school, where we picked up the Volkswagen and put it at the gym doors. When they tried to get out after the pep rally, the doors wouldn't open. We had Joe's 1959 Mercedes-Benz that he would hurtle through the roads behind Seattle Prep, and he would constantly explain how the thing worked. And I got tired of hearing how the glow plug on the front dash, you had to wait for that to really grow cherry red before you could start the car. I guess in summation, looking at Joe and looking at all the people out here, it's obvious to me just how many people Joe impacted. And as I read the Bible, there's a passage in 1 Corinthians 13 when it talks about the properties of love. And the last property is that love doesn't end. So I'm looking out here, and I know in my personal life, anybody I've ever really loved, I never stopped loving. Whether it's my mom, my dad, my brother, my wife, my kids, it is never ending. So all of you out there are going to walk away with a piece of Joe Mead, whether you like it or not, because you're part of his life, and part of that love, and part of that existence. And I'll always be there. I spend time throughout my entire adult life thinking about all those people that I know and that I love. And you will do the same. Joe's not gone. Love never ends.
Joe and I were close in many ways. Joe was 2 days younger than I, and over the years our paths crossed many times, many places. He spent a lot of time in Alaska. Over the years I spent time in Alaska. It always seemed that when I was headed to Alaska, he was headed back to Seattle. But there was many times when we get together in Anchorage and have lunch or dinner together. Later years, one of my daughters married a young man from Alaska, and Joe would come out there when I was up there, and we'd have a dinner together. We have a lot of good memories as kids. You know, Joe's dad, my uncle, my dad, Joe's uncle. And as Joe built up the farm over the years, getting equipment from different places, my dad loved to go up there and play around with it. And Joe was always kind enough to let him do it. And as his dad retired, and my dad retired, and Uncle Toby retired, it became the one day a week that they would go up to the farm. And they'd spend the day running equipment. And then Roy retired. And it was kind of Roy's responsibility to see that they stayed out of trouble. And there was times that Joe would be there, and they'd be doing something, and well, dang it, that was Roy's fault. That broke down, Joe. You know, and no, it was Uncle Toby. No. That'll be pretty soon. Hey, there's a ferry to catch. Don't you guys have to catch a ferry? Roy, isn't it time they go to the ferry? You know, but they had a lot of good times. It was a day that they got to go to the farm. They got to spend it with Joe. They got to be boys themselves. And Dad always talked about that. Great family. When my mother passed away, my dad became ill very quickly. He had an aneurysm within 12 hours. And Joe was the kind of person that he put his dad on a plane and brought him down to spend time with my dad, because we didn't think he was going to be around long. And Joe was just kind. He didn't think about himself, he thought about other people, and he showed it. And Liz, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts, and everybody else. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Joe, earlier in his his life was a U.S. Army vet, and the Army has sent down some warriors to pay tribute to him, and they're going to do a special ceremony right here.